Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the self-titled debut album from The Oath. But first, let's briefly talk about simplicity in music. Now, I tend to get a lot of, well, let's call it constructive criticism on my pop reviews, saying that, man, it's just pop music. It's not trying to be high art. You're being way too hard on it. And while there are points where that has actually been true, here's my common rebuttal to that statement. Good pop music, indeed good pop art, can require just as much, if not more, talent as any other brand of art. Crafting something that has artistic purpose and can appeal to a wider demographic besides yourself, that's not easy. And on a similar note, creating something compelling from a decidedly simple formula can be just as difficult. Sure, if you can play a couple of chords, you can probably make a decent pop song from that foundation. But making that foundation special so that it can transcend simplicity is an entirely different challenge. It's one of the reasons that I give pop music as much credit as I do. So when you move into riff-based punk and hard rock, you might notice that some of the compositions of the songs are pretty damn simple when it comes to chords or progressions, especially in comparison to other music. And yet through delivery, through songwriting, through presentation, or through production, you can make something entirely unique from that foundation. But even putting all that aside, there's something to be said for purity, refining a simple approach down to something so visceral and effective. You know, I keep bringing up Andrew WK, but there's a reason why his album, I Get Wet, is a near classic in my books and one of my favorite records of all time. It takes a very simplistic approach to composition, lyrics, and delivery, but it uses that simplicity in creating powerful melodic hooks and pumping everything up to larger-than-life status. It's a perfect fusion of artistic intent and execution, and it's a reason why simple, hard-edged, riff-based rock and metal will never go out of style, in that quest to perfect that visceral feeling and thrill. As such, I was really looking forward to the debut album from the German heavy metal act The Oath, who are already building a reputation for monstrously powerful riffing that called back to the classic years of heavy metal. So I bought myself the album and prepared myself for a glorious trip back to the past. Did I get it? Well, for the most part I did, because the self-titled album from The Oath is pretty damn good and embodies exactly everything that it wants to be. A straightforward, unsubtle, hard-hitting, riff-based heavy metal record. And while I wouldn't quite call it great or something that you absolutely must run out and get, it's definitely a blast from the past that I really did enjoy, if only because it's so refreshing to see an act nail the basics so damn well. First, let's talk about the lyrics and theme. And I can summarize my feelings on this in 5 words. The lyrics don't really matter. They aren't particularly great from a compositional standpoint, and there are definitely your fair share of songwriting cliches that did kind of get on my nerves, but you know what? They aren't bad either. If anything, they're conventional, with a lot of common elements that you find in heavy metal songwriting, with the only element that I really noted as being particularly interesting was the recurring motif with the number 7, which from the satanic numerology that I've read tends to flip back and forth whether or not it's inscribed to either God or Lucifer. From the presentation here, I'm guessing it's probably the latter. And oh yeah, there's a pretty defiantly satanic bent to this material, but with the grimy retro 70s vibe and the occasional decent flourishes lyrically and evoking that sense of darkness and sleazy grime, it was executed well enough. I dug it. But what was interesting was how defiantly straightforward The Oath are in putting forward some pretty dark imagery that isn't exactly violent. It's more nihilistic than outwardly aggressive, and honestly, that was an element I did like. But then again, it makes sense with the band's instrumental presentation, which doesn't so opt to so much overpower the listener in darkness and try to swallow them up, then just create the atmosphere and then engage in it with hard riffs and solid melodies. And when The Oath sticks with that, they make some great heavy metal, with punchy guitar at the very front of the mix, prominent bass, and echoing bass drums that I really did like. And I can't stress that the riffs on songs like All Must Die, Night Child, Black Rainbow, and especially Silver and Dust are some of the most catchy and potent riff-based hooks that you will hear this year, bar none. However, you can tell the band also has some influences from doom metal in creating that atmosphere, and for the most part it works well, although I'd make the argument it doesn't quite play to their strengths as well as it could. The fact is, whenever the band steps away from the riffs to more atmospheric moments, like on Leaving Together or the album closer Psalm 7, the songs don't feel quite as tight or as well structured as they do in some of their other tracks. If anything, some of the transitions between components on those songs, it feel a little unnecessarily jerky, and when compared with the tighter tracks, they do suffer a little bit. On top of that, the production here doesn't quite strike me as the greatest fit for doom metal. It's a little claustrophobic and more raw and tight, and it never really develops a lot of the ponderous weight and presence that you tend to find in a lot of doom metal. Now this all takes us to our lead singer, Johanna Saldanis. Now she's a good singer, and she has a fair amount of presence from where she's positioned in the mix, and while I don't quite think she delivers a lot of emotion, she does really earn her keep on this album, and she's easily one of the highlights on the more doom-inspired tracks, as her serious delivery and real presence just does wonders for really expanding the atmosphere. But then again, on the faster riff-based songs, it's almost palpable the shift in tone between Saldanis' striking yet very much cleaner vocals and the rough edge of the guitar. You can almost feel them battling out and competing for our attention. And honestly, it doesn't quite feel as cohesive as it could. Maybe if she delivered a little bit more visceral emotion on her songs or a little bit more of a rasp in her voice, it would balance out a little bit better, and it honestly probably would have almost certainly helped the overall atmosphere. But you know what? It's not that big of an issue, and in the end, I really did like this album. It's defiantly old school in its approach to heavy metal, and it definitely wears its influences on its sleeve. But when the hooks and presentation are this good, probably even enough to have stood out in the eras in which they draw, you can't really call this album a throwback. But despite how great the hooks are, the richness of the atmosphere, and the overall great cohesive instrumental interplay, I don't quite think I really love this album. As much as the lyrics don't hurt this album, they don't exactly help it either in making some of the songs stand out. And while Saldanis is a very good vocalist, I'm not convinced that her vocal delivery has the visceral punch or emotive weight to really match the instrumentation as of yet. But you know what? Considering this is a debut album, I'm gonna weigh on the side of optimism and definitely give this album an 8 out of 10 because I really did enjoy it. This is raw, riff-based heavy metal to the core, and of the debut acts coming out this year, the self-titled album from The Oath is one you don't want to miss, so check it out. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. If there's anything I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or if there's any other albums coming up that you'd like me to take a look at, I'd be more than happy to give them a listen. So until then, I'm Mark, and I'll see you next time.